Welcome to Desert Island Geek. Each episode, we welcome one self-confessed geek to our deserted island. But there's a catch. They may bring 5 and only 5 of their most essential geek items they simply cannot live without. In this programme, we're joined by Neil Dixon, the maker of things real, virtual and wordish. It states on his website that in the morning he makes useful things in leather, during the day does web dev for bitesizetv.com, and at night writes historical thrillers and speculative fiction alongside drawing and getting wet in the Atlantic surf. Neil was also the former customs officer of the desert island. I say former, as due to the incident, the island has been inhabitable since late 2008 until now. Hence, we have started to open up entry to the island, and it was deemed that Neil would be the ideal first human being to go back. His involvement in the incident has never been fully explained. Neil, welcome back to the customs office.
I'm slightly apprehensive to be back here. After the incident, and to see the state the island is in, and I'm happy to see from what I can see so far that it's back to a fairly normal state.
Yes, we've the basic infrastructure for human life has been re-established.
That's comforting, considering I'm going to spend a little time here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting time. You'll be able to see it up close and potentially highlight some issues to make better for the guests to come.
And I won't have to spend my time clearing up after previous guests, which again is quite refreshing.
Indeed, we are at a sort of a clean state is probably the safest way to say it. Are you looking forward to your time away?
To relax a little bit, yeah, I am actually. It's been a busy few years since the incident and since my hiatus from the island and various other things. It will be very good to sit down for a little bit and focus on some more internal aspects of life, shall we say, since I will be very limited as to what I can do and deal with on the island.
So the rules are 5 items, 5 must-have items. A website, a podcast, a Twitter feed, a book, and a gadget or device. That is what we're going to talk through between now and the end of the programme. And so let's start off with your website. Now, you are allowed Wikipedia. That is available by default. What is the other website that you have chosen to have access to?
This was quite tough because I tend to not access one particular area. I tend to use social streams a great deal, and I'm very careful of who I follow. And so information that I need, generally speaking, comes through my social streams. But I think the one site I would need would be imdb.com, Internet Movie Database.
Why is that?
I think with time on my hands, being someone who's a storyteller and loving movies, I'll find myself just going through plots and storylines and remembering characters and remembering movies that I've loved. And inevitably, I will completely forget some actor's name, some director's name, who did this, who did that, what else he was in. I will see the face so clearly. I'm very visually orientated, so I will see the scene and the face, and I'll see everything. And some piece of information will escape me about that movie. And I just won't be able to sleep. It'll be like having something on the tip of your tongue, and I won't be able to sleep. When I'm watching movies, I'm constantly picking up my phone, dipping into IMDb, finding out who that particular character is, where else I saw him, what's he doing now, has he done anything else more recently? And it would be such a frustrating time not to have IMDb.
Would it make you feel even more alone and marooned in that you think, oh, that looks like a really great movie, everyone else is enjoying it and I can't?
Oddly enough, no. It would create a mental list of what I need to do once I get back home. And I tend not to rush out and see movies anyway. I very rarely go to the cinema. And living on the North Cornwall coast in almost the middle of nowhere in a little village, there are few options within a sensible drive for the cinema anyway. We have a wonderful, very small independent cinema called Rebel Cinema near Bude, which is a fantastic job. It's a superb experience. But it's small, and it's a little limited as to the range of movies it gets. So I tend not to go to the cinema too much, and I tend not to follow too many trends and the hyperbole all around movie promotion. So no, actually that won't be a problem for me.
It's more the database aspect of it as to what else have they done. I'm sure I've seen them before. Why
Absolutely.
did they go from that movie to that movie and then, they went back to that sort of genre of movie? It's that kind of thing that interests you.
Yeah, it's remembering, it's seeing the threads, who worked with whom and what they did afterwards, and did they disappear, and do they even have an IMDb listing, and discovering the little gems of movies that someone who you know well and enjoy their work, who was uncredited on some movie back in the 70s or something like that. It's finding those little snippets of information. That's the bit that appeals to me about IMDb.
I guess you will get some of that information from Wikipedia.
Yes, that's true. Some of that, but IMDb, the ability to have a consistent interface where you can immediately get to the filmography without any sort of wading through some bits of other bits of information, and seeing recent photographs of people so that you can actually pinpoint who it is you have in your head, or who it is the visual image that you have of someone, to actually discover what their name is. Because that's part of my problem. I think it runs in my family. And at my age, I'm getting to that point where I just can't remember people's names quite as well.
I've no problem with that at all. You can add that into the list. IMDb and Wikipedia are your two websites that will get you through your time on there. Website's done. Next, podcast. Which one will it be?
Again, a tough one, because I don't listen to that many podcasts, and I don't have a regular place I would go to for particular pieces of information, again, because I gather everything from my social feeds. So I thought this might be an opportunity to bring something up from the past that didn't quite go right. So my choice of podcast is Pop-Up Chinese, which is a podcast about learning Mandarin Chinese, obviously. And this goes right back to when I was in school. I had the option of doing French, German, or Chinese. We had to do one language for O-level. And because I was always a little different and a little quirky, I chose Chinese. And we had the option of Chinese because the school's chemistry teacher was fluent in Chinese, had spent time in China, and was married to a Chinese woman who used to come in and help with some of the language learning. The problem was I utterly failed Chinese O-level. I was terrible at it. And some of that is down to the fact that I really find learning languages very difficult. Whether I'm not wired in the right way or what, I don't know, but I find it very, very tough to learn a new language. I also failed abysmally in chemistry, the other subject taught by the same teacher, and he was the kind of teacher where the moment he walks into the classroom and opens his mouth, you just want to fall asleep. I wouldn't say he was a bad teacher. He just, the type, just you're just not engaged at all, and it disappointed me.
And do you think that's why you didn't do so well? You're blaming the way that you're wired, but do you feel that maybe it was just the way you were taught?
The wired part makes it more of a challenge, and it would have been more difficult for anyone to teach me a language. That I've discovered since, in adult life, where I've tried to learn snippets of Spanish for Spanish holidays and so on. But the fact that the two subjects I did the absolute worst at were Chinese and chemistry, and I was interested in both, very interested in both. And yes, absolutely, the way it was taught was a huge contributing factor.
Okay, so you're hoping that your time in the island will give you time to focus on this. The female presenter of the podcast, 1,300 podcasts to listen to, so it's going to do you quite a long time, isn't it?
It is, and not all of them are actually specifically language learning based. There's a lot of sort of interviews and discussions and so on, and a lot of background. And I like the style. I like the fact that you get a good feel for the language and the culture, as well as simply learning grammatical constructs and different words.
So it's more conversational Chinese rather than just on the basics.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to actually use a language and being able to converse and understanding enough to be able to ask someone where the nearest lavatory is one thing, but having a conversation and being able to interpret the response back, and that's something I find with languages is particularly with my feeble efforts with Spanish, is to find the right phrase, ask something, and then this huge surge of language comes back at you that you don't even decipher one syllable of it. You just hope that it actually relates in some way to what you've just asked. And that's basically the way that I survive when I go abroad and hope that someone knows English. But and the other aspect of Chinese again is I will be able to rekindle my official class generated Chinese name, which I remember to this day, unlike most of Chinese, which is I probably won't get the intonations right, so I'll probably be saying something completely different because intonations are very important with Chinese. Sun Feng Tian, which Sun being the surname that I chose, and Feng Tian, which, if I remember correctly, means Phoenix Field, which is slightly odd, to say the least, but it had a nice ring to it, I thought.
I think it's a perfectly fine name to have. They like to do surnames first, don't they?
Yes.
Do you feel that you will, because you've got no one else to try this out on, to gauge an idea as to whether or not you've got it right or that you're feeling you've got the intonations correctly? Do you not feel that would frustrate you?
Probably, particularly with the intonations, and I may well leave the island, seek out a Chinese person, and inadvertently insult them in ways that will lead to my utter demise. Maybe there's a mammal with enough developed vocal cords that I may be able to teach him a few words, help me out,
well,
a monkey or something.
Yeah. It is possible after the incident that some of the animals may have extra special behaviours. So Pop-Up Chinese is the podcast of choice for Neil Dixon on Desert Island Geek. And we move on to Twitter feed. Who's it going to be?
I don't follow a great many people on Twitter. I'm very, very selective. And I'm very aware that social can become a great deal of very useless noise. But this feed is one that I started following maybe only a few months ago. Simply came onto my radar randomly, I think, with retweets. And it's a woman called Karen Janes. She lives out in South Africa, which already gives her a slightly unique angle on the world. She's a writer, a playwright, I think. Very witty. And she clearly works hard to manage how she treats her followers on Twitter. She's not someone who broadcasts too much, so she does get involved in conversations. She has a fair few retweets as well as tweets of her own, but she's selective. She makes me laugh, she makes me smile, she makes me want to go off other places and explore things a little deeper, subjects that she might post about. She's not overly opinionated. She doesn't have enormous political or religious views. And the one thing that's really important, because it's one of the things that will, when I follow someone on Twitter for the first time, it's one of the things that will most commonly have me drop them as someone to follow. She doesn't burst tweet. So you don't go into Twitter at some point in the day and your entire feed is filled up with 20 or 30 retweets from one person on your feed. Mm-hmm. And that bugs me. I know people have limited time and they can only get to Twitter at certain times of the day, so they do the little burst. But there are plenty of tools out there to manage that. But particularly when it's someone who posts carefully and curates what they're actually putting onto the feed. Some of it's personal, some of it's retweets, some of it's deliberately trying to make you smile and make you laugh. One of my favorite regular tweets of hers is what she calls an underappreciated word. And she'll find some obscure word from the dictionary that you've never heard of that has some really bizarre, quirky meaning. And those always make me smile.
I've got one here from her website. Vibrissa, which is a tactile bristle as a cat's whisker. So that kind of gives you an idea of...
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely wonderful.
One of the words of the day. I've had a look at her Twitter feed to obviously check it for entry or disallowment from the island. She does, like you say, it is quite a wide variety of bits and pieces, but they all seem joined together and not much of a surprise. They're all around a certain number of things. Yeah, there's no sort of surprises. It's almost like her brand is intact, even if she's retweeting other people as well as saying stuff herself. So... yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, she's as I say, she carefully curates what she puts up, and I feel I have no idea. I wouldn't know unless I actually communicated and had a good discussion with her. But I feel that what she chooses to retweet and tweet says something about her, just a little bit. I mean, whether that is the real her or the brand she creates, that's fine. We all have brands to some extent. But she's consistent. She consistently makes me smile or makes me laugh or makes me intrigued at something. And she never disappoints. And yeah, it's one of those reliable faces to see in the Twitter feed. Oh, she also doesn't change her avatar every 5 minutes, which absolutely confuses me when people do that.
Well, that won't be an issue on the island because you can only follow the one person. So that won't be a concern. I'm not quite... The Twitter feed is a new rule within the customs office here, and I'm not quite sure whether to allow links to be followed on Twitter feeds yet, or whether or not you'll only be able to read what comes up in the tweet. In which case, her actually putting those words in her tweet is obviously quite good for you, rather than just saying, go to the website and have a look at my word of the day.
Well, you've just highlighted another positive about how she manages her feed, in that I don't feel I need to click on and go somewhere else to explore something unless I choose to do so. It is encapsulated within the feed.
I'm going to allow that one through as well, so a clean slate so far. Links to everything that Neil chooses will be at desertislandgeek.com/Neil Dixon, and so you can then click on that and go and have a look at Karen's feed for yourself. So that is a Twitter feed. Still to come, Gadget, but now it's book time. What is your book choice for you to take to the island?
My first thought was to pick a classic. Something that has been with me for many, many years. Probably absolute top of that list would be To Kill a Mockingbird. But I found... once I started thinking about it, I thought, no, actually, there's been some more books more recently which have had a significant impact on me creatively and have helped to steer some of the writing that I have done. And probably the most impactful has been Clive Barker's The Great and Secret Show. I'm a bit of a latecomer to Clive Barker's writing. I've been a fan of the Hellraiser series of movies since they began. So I've been aware of the kind of work and the kind of mind behind the work that he pushes out, but only fairly recently into his books. And The Great and Secret Show has that wonderful balance that he's able to create between fantasy and horror. I'm not a great fantasy reader. I'm very much a great horror reader. I like very uncomfortable horror. I like horror that will make me squirm a little. He's able to do that and balance it out with a level of color and an ability to describe such fantastical things that I think that's the only way to describe it. They are so outworldly and otherworldly that if he went into too much detail, you'd get too wrapped up in the finer points of something that doesn't exist and cannot exist and you cannot conceive anyway. And if he has too little detail, you'd make too much up in your own head. And he gets the balance just so beautifully right. And this particular story had always apparently been the first of three. He wanted a trilogy. And it was many years until he wrote Everville, which is the sequel. And he still, despite this one coming out a good few years ago, he still hasn't written the third. And it's only fairly recently he's started to suggest that he's ready to write the third in that series. And I'm terribly excited to actually read the third book. I think it was 1989 it came out. So it's been around a little while. Yes, I read the first one. I read the second one, Everville, which goes into more detail. So the story behind it centers on a character called Randolph Jaff, who works in the Dead Letter Office in the USA. And he discovers that there is a secret society known only as the Shoal, who practice a form of magic known as the Art. And it sounds very mysterious, and we follow his discovery journey as he uncovers who the Shoal are and what the Art is. And we never really fully understand any of it. We get pieces of information as Jaff puts things together. And he discovers different worlds and the most incredible creatures and people on his journey. Some of them very, very unpleasant, to say the least. And it's one of those few books where I really found it difficult to put it down. I was up late at night just reading. And that's very rare for me.
And I'm assuming you want it in paper form. You do have the ability to have an ebook, but I'm assuming you would prefer it in paper.
Now, you see, I'm very much on the fence because I love both sides of this. I love the ease and the flexibility and the convenience of ebook. But there is still something about paper. There is the smell of a book and the feel of a book. I'm not one for hardback books. I find them just too big and cumbersome and heavy. So I like a paperback. And just holding it in the hand, and yes, it would have to be printed in this case.
Okay. You didn't fancy taking one of your own stories with you to the island?
Oh no, because I'd end up finding something that I wanted to edit, because they really, a story's never finished. It's just, you just stop working on it and just let it go.
Frozen in time.
Yeah. You kind of just have to let go of it at some point, because I think any story can be worked. And no, I would discover some little thing that I want to change, and that would frustrate me.
Okay. Clive Barker's The Great and Secret Show, published 1989, part of the Art Trilogy series. That is your book, your final thing that you can take onto the island and get through the customs office here is a gadget or device.
And it's one I have in my hand right now.
That was one of my questions. Do you already have one?
Yes, absolutely, I have one. And it is simply the most useful little thing is probably the single object I use more than anything else that I own.
Does it make a noise so the audience can play along and see if they can guess what it is?
Well, I guess... Yeah, that's me unfolding it.
Be careful.
I'm not unfolding any blades. There we go. And it has a little...
Key ring.
Little key ring, so I can always have it with me.
Okay, so what is your gadget?
It is a very small multi-tool called a Gerber dime, and made by Gerber, obviously. And it is very typical multi-tool configuration. It has a scissors, a couple of blades, screwdrivers, a little file, a tweezers, pliers, and of course a bottle opener. But it's its size that makes it so useful. I can always have it with me, either in a pocket or dangling from a belt. It's only, about 3 to 4 centimeters long and 1.5 centimeters wide. And yet it has all these tools. They are very, very well made. All the tools are extremely useful and usable. And my one is scuffed something terrible. The edges of the outer casing are starting to round off because it's been used so much. I adore it. I absolutely adore it. The only problem being its size is that I will mislay it for weeks on end, even months on end. And it usually turns up again when I'm just at the point where I'm thinking I need to get a replacement. At that point, I'll just pick up a pair of trousers and out it will fall from a pocket at some point. And one of its most useful tools that I've never seen on anything like this before is a retail packaging opening knife.
And it does say it includes a unique blade designed to safely cut and score plastic packaging.
Yes, and I use it on pretty much anything retail-wise as well, because you won't dig too deep with the blade. It's wonderful.
I'm having a look at the technical specs. 9 grams, so yes, I can imagine you could quite easily lose it without thinking that you have lost it, feeling that it must be in your pocket, and then you tap your pocket and it's not there anymore. I
think on the island I will have to secure it to myself with a long chain or maybe a length of vine, which I'll be able to cut quite easily using the dime, of course.
Yeah, I think eventually probably your belt will perish. You'll be forced to use a vine as a belt, and you'll have to tie that as part of your belt combination.
But of course, as a result of the dime, I will be able quite easily to form anything I need on the island.
It is a very practical tool, and so I must allow it for that. But it does leave you thinking, is there nothing that would be more luxurious?
Well, my first thought was actually a good razor, because there's nothing like a good wet shave, a proper one, a single blade, none of this fancy multi-blade rubbish, but a good proper shave that you need to work with a little bit. And I had one this very morning, actually, and it feels terrific. But then I had to use the Gerber to open a bit of packaging a little after that, and I thought, no, it has to be this. I mean, I realize on the island I'm not going to be getting Amazon Prime deliveries, but
no,
just the sheer. Well, like I say, it's the one object I use more commonly than anything else I own.
Okay, the Gerber dime. Reviews are saying it is stiff to use. Have you found this?
No. What kind of wimp finds something like this stiff? I mean, I would say it's stiff enough so that it doesn't open when it shouldn't. Which, frankly, for a tool that has blades and all kinds of pieces of metal that can catch, is a good thing when it's sat in my pocket or dangling from my belt. I mean, the last thing I want is a blade popping open or something.
So with those 5 items, you're still feeling confident that it will be a good time?
Yeah, I think so. I'm hoping for a little good surf while I'm on the island. You know, maybe there's a nice break with a nice wedge. And obviously, I didn't say to bring a surfboard or a bodyboard, but I can fashion a hand plane with my Gerber dime, from a piece of wood or maybe a particularly large coconut
Mm-hmm.
and do some body surfing.
I understand the coconuts have been growing quite large recently. So, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. I could use them for shoes, hats, and body surfing.
Yeah, I reckon. Okay. Well, I'm going to allow all of those 5 things through. Some very good justifications to them. I wish you a pleasant stay on the island.
I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll discover some leftover bits and pieces from previous visitors. There has to be some magical items left over somewhere. I mean, even if they have been, shall we say, changed by what happened.
Fantastic. Neil, thank you for joining me on the desert island. I hope you do have a pleasant stay, and lovely that you will be going there to check things out for us.
Wonderful. I'm thoroughly looking forward to it.
This programme was produced and presented by Matt Wade. To listen to previous episodes, either subscribe in iTunes, your podcast app of choice, or head to desertislandgeek.com. To get in touch with the programme, if you want to take part, have a comment, or want to suggest a geek for a future podcast, drop us a message in a bottle to customs@desertislandgeek.com.